Well, welcome to week 2 of a series we've been in called Elijah. My name is Gwinn. I'm a worship pastor here at Experience Life. I also want to welcome those of you watching at Church Online or one of our other West Texas campuses via video. We're glad you guys are with us as well. Now, if you missed last weekend, you're going to want to go back and check it out. Kyle did an amazing job of just kind of introducing this topic and talking about the life of Elijah, and more specifically, the prayer life of Elijah. He started in James chapter 5. I'll share that with you real quick. James 5:16 says, "The earnest prayer of a righteous person has great power and produces wonderful results." And this verse is referring to Elijah. And he told the story of Elijah. He came across this little boy that had died, and he took him upstairs and prayed intensely over him, laid over his body and prayed until the boy came back to life. Pretty amazing story. And this was Kyle's big idea at the end of it all. He said, if we want to see powerful results like Elijah did, we have to pray with the same intensity. We have to pray with the same intensity. Elijah prayed with intensity. So if we want to see results like he did, we also need to pray with intensity. Now, before we go any further today, I just need to tell you, man, I love Elijah. Elijah's awesome. Like, I want to be Elijah. He's amazing. He's pretty much the Liam Neeson of the Old Testament, right? Like, he's the baddest dude in the whole Bible, with the exception of Jesus, of course. But he's amazing. He's done some amazing things. We just told you about, bringing that boy back to life. Has anybody in here ever prayed for someone and brought them back from the dead? Just show of hands. Nobody? I prayed over a hermit crab one time. It didn't go very well, but we buried him and everything was fine. But he did some amazing things. If you want to read about the life of Elijah, you'll be amazed. 1 Kings and 2 Kings. A few of the things he did, he brought the boy back from the dead. Also, he split the water of the Jordan River. Let's read 2 Kings 2:8. Elijah folded his cloak together. He struck the water with it. The river divided, and the two of them went across on dry ground. So he parted the water of the Jordan River. You might have thought Moses was the one that had done that. No, Elijah did it too. Anybody ever done that? Got the Playa Lake to divide? Nobody? Also, check this one out. Next verse. 1 Kings 18:46. The Lord gave special strength to Elijah. He tucked his cloak into his belt and ran ahead of Ahab's chariot all the way to the entrance of Jezreel. So here, God gives him some special ability, and he runs faster than a horse. Like, how amazing is that? That's moving, right? That's a sprint in my book. And the last one, this is probably the coolest one of all of them. 2 Kings 2:11. As they were walking along, this was Elijah and Elisha, Elijah's protege, who was also awesome. They were walking along and talking. Suddenly, a chariot of fire appeared, drawn by horses of fire. It drove between the two men, separating them, and Elijah was carried by a whirlwind into heaven. Guys, Elijah didn't die, okay? Like, he didn't die. He got carried by this tornado up into heaven. He's like immortal or something, right? He never died. He's like a Marvel Comics character straight out of the Old Testament, right? You have like Thor, Captain America, and now you have Elijah. You have, the Incredible E or Captain Israel or whatever you want to call him. He's amazing. That's the bottom line. And if you think this is awesome, don't miss next weekend. Next weekend, Lee McClure, our downtown campus pastor, is going to talk about probably Elijah's most incredible feat of all. It's going to be amazing. But the bottom line is Elijah's awesome, okay? And if you were here last week, you might already be saying, wait a minute. What about that next verse in James? Kyle read it last week. I'll share it with you now. It says, this is verse 17. Elijah was human as we are. So despite all these other things that Elijah did that were so amazing, how God used him, Elijah was just a person. He was human like you and me. So what separates us from Elijah? Like, how come I'm not that awesome, right? I think it has something to do with the way Elijah prayed. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Last week, Kyle talked about intensity. Today, we're going to look at another attribute of Elijah's prayer life. And it has something to do with this drought, this next verse. Elijah was human as we are, yet when he prayed earnestly that no rain would fall, none fell for 3.5 years. So he prayed for a drought. The drought happened. It didn't rain for 3.5 years, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So, some backstory about why this drought occurred. If you look at 1 Kings chapter 17, you had Ahab. Ahab was in charge, and Ahab was not a good guy. In fact, the Bible says that he, quote, did what was evil in the Lord's sight. And so Elijah, who is God's messenger, his prophet, he prays that there would be no rain in the land. It's just kind of for a punishment for Ahab's sins. And he prays. It doesn't rain for 3.5 years. And we're going to fast forward all the way to the very end of this drought. And we pick it up in 1 Kings 18:41. So you have Elijah said to Ahab, "Go get something to eat and drink, for I hear a mighty rainstorm coming." So let's just stop and put this into context a little bit, right? It hasn't rained for 3.5 years. Not a drop. And Elijah, granted, he's the one that prayed for that to happen, right? But here he's saying, I hear a rainstorm coming. There's no indication that there was a storm building, right? There's nothing that tells us that he's prayed for rain at this point, yet he makes this incredibly bold prediction. Rain is coming. Ahab, go get something to eat. There's a rainstorm coming. This is a huge, huge, bold prediction. Now, something you should know about me, I like predictions, okay? You don't want to watch a movie or a TV show with me because I'm that guy, right? Like, I want to guess what's happening next. And I'll be whispering to you, like, I bet that guy's the killer at the end or whatever. My wife can attest to it. I think I got it from my mom because she's the same way. Sorry, Mom. But don't sit by me. I have what I call an addiction to prediction, a prediction addiction, if you will. Okay, so I thought this was a good time to share a couple of predictions with you. These are completely free. They have nothing to do with what we're talking about today, but I promise you these are stone cold locks, okay? Are you ready? You can write these down if you want to. First one is this. The Spurs are going to win the NBA championship this year because they're awesome. Steph Curry, who, I don't even care, right? It's just going to happen. Next, Superman is totally going to kill Batman because Superman has laser eyes and Batman's just a rich guy, right? It doesn't make any sense any other way. Next, hoverboards. If you buy a hoverboard, you're going to bust it. And you might possibly burn your house down in the process. And then last, Clayton's going to leave the ministry to be a bodybuilder and eventually be the governor of California. That's my favorite one. Write it down. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. So Elijah makes this bold prediction, right? The rain is coming. He sent Ahab away. It hasn't rained for 3.5 years. He says, I hear a rainstorm coming. So now all that's left to do is pray for rain. So let's pick it up in verse 42. So he says, Ahab went to eat and drink, but Elijah climbed to the top of Mount Carmel and bowed down to the ground and prayed with his face between his knees. I mean, what a beautiful picture of what Kyle talked about last week, just praying with intensity. Like he bowed low to the ground, put his face between his knees, and he prayed with everything that he had. That's intense. Next verse. Then he said to his servant, go look toward the sea. The servant went and looked, then returned to Elijah, and he reported what he saw. What did he see? Well, we're talking about Elijah here, right? The great Elijah. He prayed intensely. He prayed the way he knows how to pray. He prayed with everything that he had, that rain would come. He sends his servant to look. The servant comes back and reports what he saw. What did he see? Rain? Surely there's rain coming, right? I don't think so. He says, I didn't see anything. Uh-oh. He didn't see anything. So put yourself in Elijah's shoes. You've just prayed with everything that you have. You've done what you know to do. You've got some confidence just in God and you praying to God, right? Because you're the one that prayed for the drought in the first place. And now you've prayed, you send him away, he comes back. He didn't see anything. Next verse. 7 times Elijah told him to go and look. So again, think about this. He prays, sends his servant, the servant comes back, I didn't see anything. So what does Elijah do? Elijah prays again. And I have to imagine this time he prays with even more intensity. Like he gives it all he's got. He prays. He sends his servant to go look. Servant comes back. Nothing. So Elijah prays again. And again, I think he prays even harder. Like, what is going on? He prays with all he's got. Sends his servant off to look. Servant comes back. Nothing. If that were me at this point, I'd be like, I guess I missed something, right? Now, I've sent Ahab off. He's going to think I'm an idiot. My servant probably thinks I'm an idiot. I've missed something here, right? 7 times he sent his servant. And then, verse 44, finally, the 7th time, his servant told him, I saw a little cloud about the size of a man's hand rising from the sea. I don't know about you, but this doesn't sound like that big of a rainstorm coming, right? A little cloud appears, and for some reason, for Elijah, that's enough for him to know that God is answering his prayer. In fact, he says this, then Elijah shouted, hurry to Ahab and tell him, climb into your chariot and go back home. If you don't hurry, the rain will stop you. Elijah is completely convinced that God has answered his prayer. And then sure enough, next verse, soon the sky was black with clouds. A heavy wind brought a terrific rainstorm. Okay, so what's the point of all this? Elijah prayed with intensity, right? But he also prayed in another way. He prayed with persistence. Persistence. He didn't give up. It said he sent him back 7 times. I believe he would have sent him back 30 times. He would have prayed until God answered his prayer. And this is the big idea today, if you want to write it down. To see powerful results like Elijah saw, we need to pray with the same persistence. Pray with persistence. Don't give up. Now, I'll be the first to admit that I'm not very good at this, okay? When it comes to just praying and praying and praying and not giving up. In fact, I'll give you an example. Last year, at Experience Life, our staff kind of designated 2015 as being a God ask year. Like we were going to ask God for huge, incredible things. Like we were thinking of things that we could pray for that were so big and seemed so impossible that God would have to answer them if they were going to come to pass. And so last year, again, we brought this to our corporate prayer gatherings. And I was leading Tuesday night prayer at our Southwest campus at the time. And that's Tuesday night prayer. It's at 7 o'clock. You know, Tuesday night prayer if you want to come. It's about an hour long, free childcare. You know, if you don't have anything to do on Tuesday night and you want something to do, we meet here to pray at 7 o'clock. Is everybody clear on that? Okay, good. So last year, we brought that to the group and we encouraged them, man, find something in your life that you can pray for. Your God ask. And we wrote them on this big board and we brought them out occasionally to pray for it. And as we were doing that, I just kind of felt like we should pray just for Tuesday night prayer to grow and Wednesday night prayer. You know, we just, Wednesday night prayer is 7 o'clock at our downtown campus. They meet also. But we've been praying that these gatherings would grow, that more and more people would just catch a vision for prayer and want to come pray with us for an hour a week. And so as I thought about it and prayed about it, I kind of felt like I should put a number on this God ask for prayer to grow. And so the number I had in my head was 500. Okay, so 500 doesn't seem like a lot as big as our church is, but you have to know our prayer gatherings last year were anywhere from like 100 people, maybe up to 175, maybe a little more on big weeks. So 500 was a completely impossible number, right? But I was thinking, well, that's kind of the point, right? We're expecting God to move, and I brought that to the group. We wrote it on the board, you know, and it was official, and we were praying for it. But I got to be honest with you. Like, week after week, we tend to grow a little bit, and we almost got there one time, but It just wasn't happening. And week after week, as I saw it not happening, I got discouraged. Like it just, man, I'm being honest, it beat me down a little bit. And it changed the way I prayed for it. And it changed how often I prayed for it. And I kind of got to this point where I was like, well, man, I guess I missed something. And I look like a big idiot. You know, I'm the one that put the number on there and it's not going to happen. And I got discouraged and I quit praying by the end of the year. I didn't have the persistence that Elijah had. So my question for you today is this. What is it in your life that you've given up praying for? What have you gotten so discouraged over that you just quit praying? You've given up. Maybe it's your relationship, maybe your marriage even. Maybe your relationship is just shaky, it's broken, and you've been praying that God would restore that, and you haven't seen progress, and maybe you've seen just the opposite of that, and you've gotten discouraged and you've given up. Maybe it's a kid or a loved one that needs Jesus in their life, and they've gone so far off track, and you've prayed for them, but you've gotten so discouraged over choices they're making, and you've given up on them. And you even would hate to admit that, but you know deep down that you have. Maybe you're a single person, and you've been praying with everything you've got for God's perfect match for you, God's best for you, and that you would find your spouse. And you've been so discouraged that you've given up. What is it in your life that you've given up praying for? You know, Chris has talked a lot about Experience Life being started with prayer. You know, the first meeting was a prayer meeting. Prayer is kind of the central pillar of all that we do at Experience Life. And he's talked about how it started with people praying for God to move in Lubbock in a new way. And one of those people was his dad, Gary. And so I asked Gary just to share from his perspective what it was, what it meant to him through that process of praying, to pray with perseverance. And he was careful to point out to me that this is just his limited perspective. You know, there are more people praying. God's doing a lot of things through a lot of churches in Lubbock. But this was his account of his experience praying for God to move in Lubbock and how Experience Life started. And so I want to share a little of that with you. These are Gary's words. He says, I was motivated to start praying for revival in the spring of 1998 after Henry Blackaby came to town and did a Fresh Encounter conference at First Baptist Church. Henry encouraged the churches to come together across denominational lines to begin to pray for spiritual awakening. He emphasized that it was important for all God's people to come together with one heart and one mind to pray for the outpouring of His Spirit. Soon after this, I was introduced to some people who also felt called to pray for revival, and we began what was known as Pray Lubbock. The vision was to fill Jones Stadium with people, the people of God, crying out to God for a mighty outpouring of His Spirit. Many pastors and hundreds of lay people were involved. The movement started with large crowds and much excitement and anticipation for what God was going to do. Hear this. What I learned over a short period of time is that the people of God tend not to be patient in prayer. When we didn't see results right away, the attendance at the prayer meetings dropped off. I was leading also a prayer time for people on Saturday mornings. We started out with many people praying, but after a year or so, it was just me and two ladies. And here's the key. I was resolved to keep on praying even if I was the only one, and even in the face of discouragement. In my mind, in the minds of the friends I prayed with, Experience Life was an answer to those prayers. E-Life started about 10 years after we started praying. Experience life wasn't what we thought it was going to look like, but something happened here that was beyond explanation, and we believe that E-Life was an answer to our prayers. Can you imagine if Gary and those few people hadn't been faithful to pray persistently? Would God still have done all that he's done through Experience Life and the thousands of people saved and baptized and campuses started everywhere? Maybe. But I believe with my whole heart that God answered those persistent prayers. So again, what is it in your life that you've given up praying for that you need to pick that back up and keep on going and not lose heart, not get discouraged? See, we have to pray like Elijah prayed. He prayed with intensity like nothing else mattered. Laser focus. And he prayed with persistence. He didn't give up. And that's what I'm encouraging you to do today. Again, back to James 5. I've inserted these words here. The earnest or intense, persistent prayer of a righteous person has great power and produces wonderful results. Man, we need this in our life, guys. Elijah was just a man. He's just like you and just like me. And you know what the good news about this is? The same God that Elijah prayed to and the same God that worked through him to do these amazing, amazing things, that's the same God that you pray to. That's the same God that lives in you if you belong to him. The same God that hears you when you pray. The same God that loves you and knows you by name. He's the same. So pray with persistence. And don't give up. Won't you pray with me? God, I thank you for your promises. I thank you that you want us to pray to you. You want us to ask you for help. God, I pray that you would fill us with just crazy faith. God, fill us with faith like Elijah. And that we would pray with that same persistence and that same intensity for the things that we need in our lives. God, lead us to the right things to pray for. We want to become people of prayer. And we know that you're faithful. God, we love you. In your name, amen.
Thanks for checking out one of our messages today. For more information about our church or to watch other messages, you can go to our website at experiencelife.now.com. Let us know if we can serve you in any way, and we hope to see you real soon.